Next attachment style is called avoidant. So this style happens in about 25% of cases. So your parents, if you are an avoidant attachment style, were strict. They were emotionally absent. They are what we called a helicopter parent. They're so concerned about whether or not you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, following the rules. Did you do your chores? Did you go to bed? Did you put your phone away? Do your homework, study for your test, call so-and-so, send that email. They're so wrapped up in just tasks that they just miss the boat in terms of providing emotional support. They might have even been physically absent parents. So they perhaps worked a lot, left you to be. You might have been home after school alone for a long time. Maybe you even needed to make yourself dinner or put yourself to bed. Or maybe you were alone in the morning and had to get yourself ready and your siblings ready for school. They're distracted. They were distracted parents. They expected you to be independent. They didn't want you to be emotionally reliant on them. They got mad if you were emotionally reliant on them. They might have even reprimanded you. You got in trouble for asking questions, for wanting love, for showing affection, for asking for affection or reassurance or validation. They would get annoyed with you as children for asking for such. Or they might have totally ignored you when you were asking for emotional needs. They weren't good at expressing their feelings. They didn't want you to express your feelings. They were slow to respond to you or to your needs. They might have been what we now call neglectful, just downright neglectful. Or they just might have been busy, like I said. It might have been work, or it might have been dating. Perhaps they were a single mom and they would be out with friends or with coworkers or on dates. They were kind of disinterested with feelings, like I said, and more concerned about manners, grades, chores, tasks. It's important to note here too, and I didn't say this already, that it's possible if you had siblings that times could change in families, times could change as parents, and what parents give to you could change based on circumstances. So let me give you a couple examples. You might have been raised in a family where, you as the oldest child, for instance, had a very secure attachment with your parents. They were loving and attentive and all these things that we already went over. But there was a change in the family, maybe their spouse died, your other parent died, or there was a loss of a job and money changed, or mental health changed with one of your parents, or addiction started. And so your younger siblings then got a totally different parenting style than you got because of circumstances. That means you are going to be different than your sibling growing up in the exact same household. Or what can happen is the opposite, where it's a very chaotic household for you as the oldest, but your parents get themselves together for the younger ones. They get help for mental health issues. They go into rehab and they stop drinking, for instance. And then they're super attentive and very present in the bonding experience for your other sibling or siblings. And so again, that's a completely a reversal of what I just described, but that can happen. And that can explain why siblings in the same household grow up and turn out to be completely different in their attachment styles. So for this parent that is kind of rejecting you and helicoptering you and relying on you to be really independent, you are going to grow up as an avoidant attachment style. So as an avoidant, you're very strong as an adult. You're very independent and you're very self-sufficient. You needed to be your whole life. You're not so emotionally attached to your partner or really to anybody. You feel good about yourself. You have high self-esteem. You're confident. You're, like I said, independent. You don't need a relationship to feel complete like the anxious attachment did. You don't want to depend on others for your well-being or for anything. And you don't really want others to depend on you. So like the secure attachment, remember I had said, my partner is my best friend and I'm my partner's best friend because we have a secure attachment. Well, with the avoidant, I'm not really your best friend and I don't really want you as mine. I don't need one, is what an avoidant would say. The wall is up there. They don't trust easily. They never could. They didn't have parents that were consistently, that they could rely on them. They got in trouble for being emotionally needy, remember? So they certainly are not going to be emotionally needy as adults. They usually avoid emotional closeness. They hide or suppress their feelings. They just they hold back. And you as a secure attachment or even as an anxious attachment might know that there's emotion in there somewhere. You suspect it, but they're not going to be open to share. That's going to be really hard for an avoidant. They could be dismissive of others. They might feel threatened by anyone being close to them, and they're going to keep people at an arm's length, not really thinking that their needs could ever be met. So the problem here comes when an avoidant gets in a relationship with an anxious attachment. This is going to look really, really different, right? So a secure attachment is going to be secure no matter what and maybe annoyed with their avoidant partner. But they're not going to be afraid. They're going to cope with it and try to pull them out the best that they can, but they're never going to be freaking out that the relationship is doomed. And anxious is going to be always worried and paranoid that this person that they're with who is an avoidant attachment style is hiding something, doesn't love them, is halfway out of the relationship, which of course isn't necessarily happening. The avoidant just doesn't need as much as an anxious attached kind of person. And so that the avoidant is going to be the one to tell an anxious attachment that you are a lot and possibly break up with that anxious attachment or just rely on their alone time to get through in the relationship. Really important for you, as I've already said, to know where you are and where you stand in this attachment style so that you can do a better job at working towards a secure attachment. So that you can have the healthiest relationship possible. Again, what is the treatment? One, to understand, like I already said about anxious attachments, to be mindful and be aware of where you are and why you're doing what you're doing. Learn how to trust, get comfortable understanding what emotions are. I mean, I can start with the basics in terms of just explaining how many different feelings there are and emotions and how it's normal to have more than one at the same time, helping them understand that, pulling it out of them to actually begin to feel trusting of me or their partner, that they can share what it is that they're actually feeling with no ramification. Reparent their inner child again, and to challenge their thoughts when they're thinking that this is not a good idea to open up. But really, communication is huge, as I will say many, many times, and that will be another episode about communication styles and effective communication, but that will need to be taught and fully understood and practiced when it comes to talking to your partner about your avoidant attachment style. So the last one that I'm going to talk about is the fourth and final attachment style, which is disorganized. So this is the least healthy of them all. A very small percentage of people generally have this kind of attachment style. And it's called disorganized. And these children have parents that are usually very neglectful. Abuse and neglect are typical in this household. Mental health issues, addiction run high in families that have a disorganized attachment style. The parents, there's a lot of trauma that happens. Caregivers are always extremely inconsistent. They are seen as a source of fear to their children. Children are afraid to go to them with any information, certainly with feelings, because number one, their parent can just not handle it. Their mental health is so bad that they cannot self-regulate their emotions, and or they just can't handle what a child has to say to their parent, which is so sad. Or if it's not mental health, it could be addiction, or an abusive relationship that they are in. So children are often left very confused in this family and very afraid. So as adults, they grow up showing very unstable and unpredictable behaviors, just like their parents did. They can be clingy and emotional, but then super aloof and independent. And again, very confusing to their partner, who probably is not a disorganized attachment style. They want intimacy and closeness. They always did, even as a child, but they can't trust. They never did trust. They certainly did not trust their primary caregivers, who were their first example of love. And so they in turn just end up pushing people away. They don't know how to regulate their emotions, just like their parents did not know how to regulate emotions. And they really avoid strong attachments because of this very, very strong sense of abandonment. They were abandoned as children, emotionally, certainly, maybe even physically. And they just expect, and that's all they know in the world. So they kind of just expect from other people that they're going to be abandoned again. So what is the point? And that fear of abandonment then just triggers so many things and is the crux of why they do what they do. They could be mean. They could be abusive themselves. They could push people away very quickly. Again, because they hurt people, right? I mean, I say this a lot. Hurt people. They're hurt. They've been hurt. So they're going to hurt you because they're going to hurt you before you hurt them, is kind of their mentality. And so that fear of rejection just kind of sets the stage for them. They have a lot of anxiety. As an adult, you are probably have mental health issues at this point in your life, mood disorders, you might self-harm, you might have substance abuse issues or have had them, and it's possible you have developed a personality disorder. Possible your parents had that personality disorder. That will be an entire episode on narcissism and borderline personalities, which tend to fall in this disorganized attachment style. If that's the case and there's borderline or narcissism, that relationship is not going to work. They're just so broken and they don't know how to have a good relationship, that the likelihood, unless they've done serious work, but even if that's the case, this is a hard one. I hate to be so pessimistic, but you can kind of understand how this developed and where this developed when they had parents that were so disorganized and so chaotic and so not functioning very well, and abusive or neglectful, and dealing with mental health or abuse or addiction. So that is my overview on attachment styles. And again, really important for you to know where you are and where your spouse is, and to do the work to pull your way out so that you could be in the best relationship. You could be the best that you can be. Thanks.